Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Hello, CJ.
Hello, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
President Duterte said some local government units may have to take a back seat in the distribution of financial assistance for families affected by the imposition of the enhanced community quarantine.
China's coronavirus cases hit a 7-month high after a cluster at a test site helped drive up numbers as the Delta variant challenges Beijing's grip on the pandemic.
And the Taliban were in control of 6 Afghan provincial capitals after a blitz across the north forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes for the relative safety of Kabul and other centers.
And the influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called Seoul authorities perfidious over the South's joint military exercises with the United States and demanded Washington withdraw its forces from the peninsula.
President Duterte said some local government units, or LGUs, may have to take a back seat in the distribution of financial assistance for families affected by the imposition of the Enhanced Community Quarantine, or ECQ. During his pre-recorded talk to the people, the president has ordered the Department of Interior and Local Government and the Department of Social Welfare and Development to take over the cash aid distribution in some disorganized LGUs. The president said some LGUs don't know how to set up an organized distribution process of cash assistance. Let's listen in.
Alam mo, may isang syudad ako dito na I order your department and itong DCWD na kayo na ang magbigay ng mga ayuda, pati yung mga kung anong maitulong sa national government, sa local government units na walang alam, na hindi marunong mag-organize ng mga distribution, and it only results in disorder. So tinanggal ko muna yan sa kanila at ibinigay ko doon sa Department of Interior and Local Government, pati ang DSWD. Kayo na muna hanggang matuto sila. Nakita mo naman ninyo, it's all on TV na wala talagang kaalam-alam itong mga mayor na to. So tanggalan mo natin muna ng itong pamimigay, pag-distribute ng pera pati tulong ng gobyerno.
Now, he didn't name the LGUs but pointed out their mistakes on the pandemic responses, and that had happened several times. DILG Secretary Eduardo Año said the government has allocated 10.89 billion pesos in funds to more than 10 million low-income Filipinos residing in the National Capital Region, which is now under the most restrictive quarantine classifications effective until August 20.
In a related news, the distribution of cash assistance to low-income households in Metro Manila will still be on August 11, according to Malacanang. The clarification was made a day after President Rodrigo Duterte stripped an unnamed local government unit in Metro Manila of its role to distribute the financial assistance to poor families affected by the 2-week enhanced community quarantine in the region. Take a look.
Kayo namang mga kasama ko sa Malacanang Press Corps, wala pong pangalan at walang pangalan ng syudad na nabanggit ang ating presidente. Bilang tagapagsalita, I cannot add doon sa hindi ilinabas ng ating Pangulo. Meron po siyang dahilan kung bakit hindi niya siguro linabas yon, pero hindi ko po alam kung bakit. So I will have to leave it at that. I am only a spokesperson. If the principal did not want to reveal kung sino yung mayor na yon at anong LGU na yan, so be it. No? Let's leave it at that. Ngayon, malalaman naman po natin yan dahil ang utos ng presidente ay for the DILG, the PNP, and even the AFP to assist, no, and the DSWD na sila ay magbibigay ng ayuda sa syudad nito. In due course po, malalaman natin kung ano yan. Magkakaroon ba ng abirya? Tingin ko wala. Dahil nung mga nakalipas naman pong pamimigay ng ayuda ay DILG at DSW din po ang nabigay. No? Merong isang pagkakataon na diniretso po ng DSWD at DILG sa mga beneficiaries. At isang LGUs naman po to, kung matutuloy ito, I don't think there will be a problem. Pero as to the identity, hindi po binanggit ng presidente. It's not for me to say kung sino po yan. I think yung premise mo na this is Manila, I cannot confirm that because I am not able to confirm it. Now, if the president did not name him, so be it. Pero sa tingin ko, pictures cannot lie. Ang reklamo ni presidente, hindi niya mapatupad yung mabuting pagbabakuna. Dalawang larawan po kasi yan, no? Yung pagpila sa baha, sa ulan, na matinding ulan ng mga kababayan natin. At pangalawa nga po, yung pagkakagulo sa bakunahan, nakita rin po natin sa mga larawan yan. So pictures don't lie at naisip naman ni presidente na kung ganito rin ang mangyayari pagdating sa distribution ng ayuda, baka lalong dumami pa ang ating COVID cases sa lugar na yan. Wala naman pong inaakusa, walang parusa. So wala pong karapatan na nalalabag. Ang sinisiguro lang ng presidente yung karapatan ng taong bayan makakuha ng ayuda sa pinakamabuting mga pamamaraan.
In his pre-recorded talk to the people aired Monday night, Duterte slammed an unnamed mayor in Metro Manila for having a disorganized mind. Duterte tasked the DSWD and DILG to take over the cash aid distribution to prevent overcrowding and disorder.
Staying in the country, Malacanang today urged Metro Manila residents to follow the prohibition of outdoor exercise amid the enhanced community quarantine in the country's metropolis. The outdoor ban, under a resolution inked Monday by 17 Metro Manila mayors and MMDA chairperson Benjamin Abalos Jr., no one is now allowed to exercise outdoors until August 20. Take a look.
So ito'y kinumbine namin lahat ng mayors. Kahapon, nagkaroon kami ng meeting. Kahapon lang po ito, nag-exchange notes na naman, assessment on the ground. Ang sabi po nila ay ganito. Anyway, 10 araw na lang. 10 araw na lang makakasama sa Metro Manila. No? Baka po pwede, tanggalin na rin natin yung lalabas ka ng bahay. Bakit? Hindi mo kasi masabi, baka mamaya nasa labas ka, may dumaan sa iyo, mahawa ka. No? So sana itong ECQ na ito, alam ko mabigat po itong ayuda na ito, mabigat ang sakripisyo ng gobyerno rito, mabigat ang sakripisyo nating lahat, nasa bahay tayo. Why not make the most out of this? No? Yun naman na napag-usapan ng mga mayor. But after this, ano malay natin, gumanda na, I'm sure tatanggalin na po itong exercise na ito, pwede na. It's just the next coming 10 days. At isa pang rason dito na talagang tingin ko tumama sa puso ng bawat isa. Bawat mayor po ay magulang eh. Hindi namin alam ang epekto nito sa mga bata sa ngayon. Maraming nababasa, maraming naririnig na pati ang mga bata, maski nga ang bakuna na ibibigay na sa mga bata. Ano ang punto po ng mga mayor? Ang punto po nila ay pag-iingat ng bawat isang pamilya, bawat isang komunidad. So sana po maunawaan ninyo ang rason bakit itong polisiyang to ang ginawa nila. Yung sa exercise. Inuulit ko, ito po ay 10 araw lamang.
Now, Metro Manila was placed on ECQ from August 6 to the 20th to curb the spread of the more infectious Delta variant of COVID-19.
Now, the country's overall tally of coronavirus patients who beat the disease have reached 1,567,920 as 7,964 new recoveries were recorded today. The Department of Health said the figure is equivalent to a 93.5% recovery rate from a total of 1,676,156 infections since the start of the pandemic last year. The DOH also tallied 8,560 new confirmed cases, bringing the total number of active cases in the country to 79,016, or 4.7% of all cases. Of the active cases, 94.4% are mild, 1.7% are asymptomatic, 1.7% are severe, 1.18% are moderate, and 1% are in critical condition. Also logged were 92 new fatalities, raising the death toll to 29,220, or 1.74% of the total cases.
Meanwhile, China's coronavirus cases hit a 7-month high today after a cluster at a test site helped drive up the numbers as the Delta variant challenges Beijing's grip on this pandemic. State media has described the current outbreak, which has sparked local lockdowns, mass testing, and travel restrictions, as the most severe since the virus emerged in the central city of Wuhan. Authorities had brought domestic infections down to virtually zero, allowing economic activity to rebound, albeit with tight border restrictions. But now, cases are again rising. On Tuesday, Chinese health authorities reported 143 new coronavirus infections, and 108 of them are locally transmitted. Dozens of cases in recent days have been linked to a COVID-19 testing site in eastern Yangzhou City. In a sign of the anxiety over even relatively minor outbreaks, several officials have been issued warnings for mishandling mass testing, which city authorities said allowed the virus to spread. Yangzhou City authorities said, quote, a small number of party members and cadres have yet to perform their duties properly, unquote. Tuesday's numbers are the highest since January, when the country logged 144 new cases and 126 domestic infections, mostly in the northern regions.
To the U.S. now, where the Pentagon said Monday it will make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for all members of the U.S. military by mid-September, amid an alarming surge in infections by the Delta variant. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said in a memo he would ask President Joe Biden to approve the move in about 5 weeks, even if none of the current vaccine gains full approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. But the order could come earlier if the Pfizer vaccine gets approval before then. Officials say they think Pfizer could earn full FDA approval by the beginning of September. Because the COVID vaccines have only had emergency approval, the U.S. military has until now not forced troops to have them, as it does for other inoculations. Doing so would have opened the door to legal challenges unless Biden issued a waiver to allow it. If the Pfizer or another vaccine does not get full FDA approval by mid-September, Austin said he would go ahead and seek Biden's approval. Biden released a statement strongly supporting the decision.
Meanwhile, American visitors are driving across the Canada-U.S. border, and they're cheering the reopening of the world's longest land boundary 17 months after all non-essential travel was halted to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Let's take a look.
It was beautiful. It's been 17 months I haven't been in Montreal, and I come in 10 times a year to Montreal.
Buses and fucking.
I happened to have vacation scheduled today, and it was the day the border reopened, so the timing was perfect.
I can do it for a price. do it for a price.
The U.S. State Department has advised Americans to avoid all travel to France over rising coronavirus cases in the country. France is battling a fourth wave of the virus, even though COVID-19 hospitalizations are still way off previous highs. The State Department issued a level 4 or do not travel advisory for France on Monday based on a parallel warning from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the country's top medical body. The CDC said if you must travel to France, make sure you are fully vaccinated before travel. France has recorded more than 6 million cases and 111,000 deaths in total, and daily cases have crept back up to around 20,000 a day, while deaths remain low compared to the height of the pandemic. A total of 74 million vaccine doses have been administered in France, according to the World Health Organization, and over 55% of the eligible population have received both vaccine doses. It has also enforced a COVID pass for routine aspects of life.
Meanwhile, in Australia, Sydney posted a new record of COVID-19 infections today as the city struggles to control an outbreak that is sending other Australian regions into lockdown. Let's listen in.
But unfortunately, those that are unvaccinated of any age, continue to be vulnerable. And with case numbers where they are, unfortunately, if you live in those local government areas of concern, there is a high chance now that you could get the virus. Please protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, your community. So policy positions that may have worked in the past aren't going to have effect with Delta. And that is something we need to accept. We need to accept this is a different variant and you need to approach it in different ways. Can I just finish my sentence on that one? So in relation to that point, based on the health expert advice, vaccination reduces your chance of spreading, it reduces your chance of landing in hospital, and it reduces your chance of dying. That's why a targeted approach in those local government areas with our vaccine strategy is absolutely key to seeing us maintain and reduce those case numbers. Please know that had we not been in this difficult lockdown for 6 or 7 weeks, the case numbers would undoubtedly have been in their thousands and thousands every day. That is no doubt about that. That part of the challenge we have in New South Wales is because of lack of compliance. Part of the challenge is just because Delta is very, very different to anything we've seen before. And part of the challenge is, of course, having people accept, a small handful of people accept that this is serious. Unfortunately, there are still pockets of people who think that this is not a serious illness, who don't believe that they need to follow the health orders.
Now, New South Wales State announced 356 new cases, a fresh record for a Delta variant outbreak that began in mid-June and continues to grow in a population with low vaccination rates. More than 5 million people in Sydney, Australia's biggest city, are now in their 7th week of lockdown as the cluster hit 5,805 cases with 32 deaths to date. The coastal town of Byron Bay became the latest put under stay-at-home orders, joining regional centers such as Newcastle and Tamworth with a snap 7-day lockdown announced late Monday after an infected person traveled there from Sydney. Meanwhile, another 5 million residents of Melbourne are in their 6th pandemic lockdown after a fresh cluster emerged in the city last week. Australia had dodged the worst ravages of the pandemic through a strategy of closed borders, lockdowns, mandatory travel quarantine, and aggressive testing and tracing. But those tools appear blunted in the face of the highly transmissible Delta variant and have left Australians wary of repeated lockdowns. And the news continues here in Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Malalayong lugar ang kanilang narating para maghanap buhay. Tulungan ang pamilyang iniwan sa sariling bayan. Yan ang ating mga overseas Filipino worker. Pero dahil sa di pangkaraniwang pangyayaring hatid ay krisis, may ilan sa kanilang nagpasyang umuwi. Pinagyaman ang sariling lupain, nagtayo ng negosyo na kasama sa puhunan ang sipag at tiyaga. Ang mga OFW, maraming sakripisyo, ninanais maging kapaki-pakinabang maging sa kanilang pagbabalik bansa. Sapagkat ang ating mga bagong bayani, Pilipino pa rin sa puso at damdamin.
Narito ang mga dapat tandaan sa panahon ng pagpapatupad ng Enhanced Community Quarantine sa Metro Manila at iba pang lugar. Una, mas mahaba ang curfew mula alas 8 ng gabi hanggang alas 4 ng umaga. Pangalawa, epektibo ang liquor ban batay sa pinagtibay ng LGU. Pangatlo, dapat manatili muna sa bahay at bawal munang lumabas maliban sa mga authorized person outside residence. Pang-apat, bawal lumabas ang mga sumusunod: 18 years old pababa, 65 years old pataas, may mga immunodeficiency at comorbidity at mga buntis. Pang-lima, pinapayagan namang lumabas ang mga essential worker at essential travels. Pang-anim, bawal ang mass gathering. Pang-pito, pinapayagan ang funeral services subalit limitado lamang sa mga immediate family members. Pang-walo, namamalaging may public transportation subalit limitado ang capacity batay sa IATF guidelines. Pang-siyam, ang mga apor lamang ang pinapayagang makapagbiyahe papasok at palabas ng NCR Plus area.
Welcome back to the news. We ignored the warnings and now it's too late. Global heating has arrived with a vengeance and we'll see Earth's average temperature reach 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels around 2030, a decade earlier than projected only 3 years ago, according to a landmark UN assessment published yesterday. Take a look.
It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change and making extreme weather events more frequent and severe. Second, it shows that climate change is affecting every region on our planet. And lastly, it explains that strong, rapid, sustained reductions in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions would be required to limit global warming.
What is clear from this report is that unless there are immediate, strong, rapid and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach.
The world listened, but didn't hear. The world listened, but it did not act strongly enough. And as a result, climate change is a problem that is here now.
Every additional half degree of warming will cause increases in the intensity and frequency of hot extremes, heavy precipitation and drought.
But the recent changes we have seen in the climate are now widespread, rapid, and intensifying. Some of the changes we see today are unprecedented in thousands of years or never seen before. It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and the land.
The report shows that in the next 20 years, global warming, the average temperature at the Earth's surface over a period of 20 years, is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above the late 1800s.
The warming we have already experienced has far-reaching consequences. Climate change is contributing to increase in extreme heat, heavy precipitation event, and the drought.
Even if the 1.5 degrees Celsius target humanity is now poised to overshoot its miraculously achieved, it would still generate heat waves, rainfall, drought, and other extreme weather unprecedented in the observational record, it concluded. At slightly higher levels of global heating, what is today once a century coastal flooding will happen every year by 2100, fueled by storms gorged with extra moisture and rising seas. The report made clear the world must brace itself for worse, potentially much worse to come. Part 2 of the IPCC assessment on impacts is slated for publication in February. Part 3, to be released in March, focuses on ways to reduce carbon in the atmosphere.
Meanwhile, the executive director of Greenpeace, UK, John Soven, said that the time window we've got to meet the Paris Agreement commitment is getting shorter. For that report, here's Patricia Rodriguez.
The UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has released its first major assessment since 2014 on Monday. The climate change report shows unequivocally that global warming is unfolding more quickly than feared and that humanity is almost entirely to blame. Executive Director of Greenpeace UK, John Soven, says that the time window to meet the Paris Agreement commitment is getting shorter and that countries must act urgently. Let's listen in to John Soven's thoughts regarding the report.
The main conclusions of this report is that climate change is getting worse and it's coming down the track faster than expected. And I think that, as we know, the Paris Agreement in 2015 agreed that countries should keep temperatures below a global average of 2 degrees C, aiming for 1.5. What this report is showing is basically the time window that we've got to meet that commitment that was made at Paris is getting shorter.
In response to this report, the UK government Britain on Monday called for urgent global action to tackle climate change. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the report makes for sobering reading and called for urgent global action, as it is clear that the next decade is going to be pivotal to securing the future of the planet. He adds that the UK is leading the way by decarbonizing the economy faster than any country in the G20 over the last 2 decades. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Patricia Rodriguez. We live in interesting times.
In other news, at least 5 people have died in raging wildfires in Algeria as firefighters battle more than 31 blazes amid blistering temperatures and tinder-dry conditions, according to officials. Photographs posted on social media show huge walls of flame and billowing clouds of smoke towering over villages in the forested hills of the Kabaidi region east of the capital, Algiers. Algeria is the latest Mediterranean country to be hit by wildfires after blazes hit Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus. Meteorologists said the temperature would hit 46 degrees Celsius on Tuesday, and the country is also struggling with severe water shortages. Fires were reported in multiple locations in 14 districts.
Meanwhile, to Greece now, where the Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the country is facing a natural disaster of unprecedented proportions as wildfires wipe out hundreds of homes and force thousands to flee. And he apologized to Greeks for the possible weaknesses in the state's response. Take a look.
Οι τελευταίες ημέρες ήταν από τις πιο δύσκολες για την πατρίδα μας εδώ και δεκαετίες. Δώσαμε και ακόμα δίνουμε τη μάχη με όλες μας τις δυνάμεις. Αλλά αντιμετωπίζουμε μια φυσική καταστροφή πρωτόγνωρων διαστάσεων. Σε λίγες μέρες ξέσπασαν 586 πυρκαγιές σε όλες τις γωνιές της Ελλάδας. Με φωτιές, οι οποίες λόγω του πρωτοφανούς καύσωνα, αλλά και της πολύμνης ξηρασίας, σβήνουν πια πολύ δύσκολα. Είναι προφανές ότι η κλιματική κρίση χτυπά πλέον την πόρτα ολόκληρου του πλανήτη, με φωτιές που διαρκούν επί εβδομάδες. Αυτό είναι αιτιολογία, όχι όμως δικαιολογία, ούτε κι άλοθη. Και θα το πω καθαρά. Μπορεί να κάναμε ό,τι ήταν ανθρωπίνως δυνατόν, αλλά σε πολλές περιπτώσεις αυτό δεν φάνηκε αρκετό στην άνηση μάχη με τη φύση. Το ίδιο ξεκάθαρο όμως θα πω και ότι θα βρεθούμε δίπλα σε όσους έπληξε η πυρκαγιά.
Firefighters were battling heat and suffocating smoke for a 7th consecutive day to try to save the Greek island of Evia from wildfires that have wiped out hundreds of homes and forced thousands to flee. Greece and Turkey have been battling devastating blazes for nearly 2 weeks as the region suffers its worst heat wave in decades. Greek officials have already blamed climate change for the extreme heat, and the United Nations released a major report showing how the threat from warming is even more acute than previously thought. 2 people have been confirmed dead in Greece and 8 in Turkey as a result of the fires, while dozens have been hospitalized. The Greek government said vital aerial reinforcements were en route to Evia to help firefighters, with Russia, Turkey, and Israel sending additional help. Many of the other fires that have hit Greece have stabilized or receded, but on Evia, Greece's second largest island after Crete, the blazes are being helped by wind and a rugged forested landscape.
A time-lapse video shows the sky above the island of Evia turning into a red haze during sunset due to the wildfires that have been raving the Greek island. Take a look.
Meanwhile, Mio Asenas from our EBC Hawaii Pacific has some updates in her part of the world, including the latest in the COVID-19 surge and a huge fire from Honolulu's industrial zone. Take a look.
Honolulu residents woke up on Sunday morning to the sound of fire engines as a massive blaze took place at the industrial area of Sand Island, not far from the airport. According to the fire department, about a half-mile's worth of plastic piping that belonged to the Frank Coluccio Construction Company went up in flames, causing a tall column of smoke that can be seen from afar.
Dito malapit sa airport, hindi ko alam kung anong mayroong sunog dyan. Yun, may umaapoy pa.
The fire was reported at about 6:20 a.m., but was not put out until more than 4 hours later, as first responders cited the lack of fire hydrants in the area. There were no reported casualties. An investigation to the cause is expected. For the 4th day in a row, Hawaii reports more than 600 new COVID-19 cases, with a positivity rate going well past 7%. According to Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, there are 213 patients hospitalized due to the infection, with 95% of them being unvaccinated. He continues to remind everyone to avoid gatherings, wear masks around others, and get vaccinated. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Mio Asenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Now, the Taliban were in control of 6 Afghan provincial capitals on Tuesday after a blitz across the north forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes for the relative safety of Kabul and other centers. Take a look.
مشهور میکنه مردم میزنه که اگر که دختر جان داشته باشه میبره اگر زن بیوه داشته باشه میبره دیگه کارش خود نمیکنه که دیگه کار بکنه یعنی در بدری نمیسه که ما از خاطر نمی ننگ ناموس کو ریخته آمده میریم اینجا
خسته هستیم که بیخی هم دل ما از زندگی سیاه شده تا کی رقم باشه هر انسان باشه رقم خسته می باشه کی خوش از دی تعالی سیاسرای مردم هستی که اولادای مردم هستی که
The insurgents now have their eyes on Mazar-i-Sharif, the north's biggest city, whose fall would signal the total collapse of government control in a region that has traditionally been anti-Taliban. Government forces are also battling the hardline Islamists in Kandahar and Helmand. the southern Pashto-speaking provinces from where the Taliban draw their strength. The United States, due to complete a troop withdrawal at the end of the month and its longest war, has all but left the battlefield. However, its special envoy, Zalmay Khalilzad, has been sent to Qatar to try and convince the Taliban to accept a ceasefire. Khalilzad will press the Taliban to stop their military offensive, the State Department said, and help formulate a joint international response to the rapidly deteriorating situation. Officials from Afghanistan's most vested neighbors, Pakistan, China, and Iran, will also attend the meeting. But Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said it was down to the Afghan government and its forces to turn the tide, and there was not much the United States could do to help.
Palestinian protesters and Israeli forces clashed close to the village of Beita near the occupied West Bank city of Nablus. Take a look. Now, protesters are calling on Israel to hand over the body of a Palestinian who was killed by the Israeli army last month. And Beita residents have been demonstrating since May against the Wildcat Jewish settlement of Evyatar. According to the Times of Israel, local resident Emad Ali Dweikat, 37, was killed during a weekly protest march against an illegal Israeli outpost known as Evyatar, built on a hilltop overlooking Beita. Dweikat was rushed to a hospital in nearby Nablus, but he died shortly thereafter. The Palestinian Red Crescent said an additional 59 people were treated for injuries, including one hit by live fire and 20 with rubber bullets. The rest were from tear gas inhalation. Beita has seethed since an illegal outpost known as Evyatar was constructed by national religious Jewish settlers back in May. Palestinians have regularly and sometimes violently protested the settler presence, leading to 7 Palestinian deaths during clashes with Israeli forces.
In other news, a Chinese court today upheld the death sentence passed on a Canadian citizen for drug smuggling, one of a number of legal cases to severely damage relations between Ottawa and Beijing. Robert Lloyd Schellenberg was originally sentenced to 15 years in prison in late 2018, but that was changed to the death penalty just months after a diplomatic rift exploded between Ottawa and Beijing over the detention of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. The upholding of the death sentence comes a week after Meng began the latest round of her court battle in Canada against U.S. extradition, a case that has infuriated China. A ruling was also expected Wednesday in the case of Michael Spavor. The Canadian ambassador said one of 2 Canadians detained by China for espionage in the wake of Meng's arrest in Canada. Prosecutors have said Schellenberg was a key member of an international drug trafficking syndicate, which in 2014 had planned to ship more than 200 kilograms of methamphetamine to Australia. Schellenberg claims he was in China as a tourist and was unwittingly swept up in a drug smuggling ring by a Chinese man recommended as a translator.
In other news, Britain's Prince Andrew has been sued in a New York court for alleged sexual abuse of a woman who says she was lent out for underage sex by late U.S. financier Jeffrey Epstein. Take a look.
I was recruited at a very young age from Mar-a-Lago and entrapped in a world that I didn't understand, and I've been fighting that very world to this day, and I won't stop fighting. I will never.
At the moment, they're going to be down there.
Yeah, well, where's that?
Back here in the country, 3 more remains of military personnel killed in the July 4 C-130 transport plane crash in Paticul, Sulu have been identified. Armed Forces of the Philippines spokesperson Colonel Ramon Zagala said Tuesday a report from the Regional Crime Laboratory Office in the region of the Philippine National Police confirmed the identities of Corporal Gemar Mondido, Private First Class Lester Alagrada, and Private First Class Benjamin Sabadukia. Zagala said the families of the 3 personnel have been informed about the report and the remains are being prepared for transport. A total of 40 bodies have now been identified, while 10 are still undergoing the identification process. Aside from the 50 military deaths, 3 civilians on the ground were killed. 46 military personnel and 4 civilians were wounded in the incident.
In other news, the influential sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called Seoul authorities perfidious over the South's joint military exercises with the United States and demanded Washington withdraw its forces from the peninsula. Kim Yo-jong's latest remarks come despite a surprise thaw on the Korean peninsula prompted by a series of personal letters between her brother and South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The 2 sides last month restored cross-border communications that were severed more than a year ago, announcing their leaders had agreed to work on improving ties. But Kim Yo-jong, a key advisor to her brother, condemned South Korea for holding dangerous joint military drills with the U.S. this month, which the North has long considered rehearsals for invasion. She expressed her deep regret at the perfidious behavior of the South Korean authorities in a statement released by Pyongyang's official KCNA news agency. Seoul and Washington are treaty allies with around 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea to defend it against its nuclear-armed neighbor.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Kumanta, sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Welcome back to the news. The Philippine economy strongly recovered in the second quarter this year to 11.8% mainly driven by base effects and a better balance between addressing the impacts of the coronavirus and the need to restore jobs and incomes for Filipinos. Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua warned the hopes for continuous positive growth could be erased by the current two-week lockdown in the National Capital Region, which accounts for a third of the economy and other areas aimed at slowing the spread of the hyper-contagious Delta variant. Take a look.
We are pleased to report that the Philippine economy strongly recovered in the second quarter of 2021. The robust performance is driven by more than just base effects. It is the result of a better balance between addressing COVID-19 and the need to restore jobs and incomes of the people. As reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority today, Philippine economic growth accelerated in the second quarter of 2021 to 11.8% from minus 17% in the same period last year. This is the highest GDP growth recorded since the fourth quarter of 1988. Prospects for a strong economic recovery in 2021 remains promising, although there are speed bumps given the ECQ in Metro Manila and other parts of the country. We are now better equipped to sustain continuous positive growth. So with the second quarter results, they are going to help us achieve our target for the year. However, it also depends on the outcome of this present ECQ. If we are able to manage the risks and everyone cooperates and adheres to the health protocol, then we will be able to lift the ECQ sooner. On the other hand, if we do not comply, then it is possible that the ECQ will be longer. It also depends on how long the ECQ will be. So we have to all cooperate with each other, take the opportunity to get vaccinated, because once we vaccinate more and more people, then we can reopen the economy more safely. We are also cognizant of the fact that our ECQ today is more managed. Unlike last year, we did not shut down public transport. Most sectors can operate. Workers are exempted from curfew. So these are important indications that we are learning to live with the virus and can help mitigate the downside risks for the second half. Thank you.
And President Duterte awarded additional cash incentives to all the Filipino athletes who competed in the recently concluded Tokyo Olympics. And he said that the Olympic medalists would also be receiving the Order of Lapu-Lapu for bringing honor to the country. In his virtual meeting with the 4 Filipino boxers who represented the country in the Tokyo Olympics, President Duterte congratulated not only the medalists, but also the athletes who joined the Olympics. And he said that all the Olympians would also be receiving a presidential citation. Take a look.
I would like to announce that in addition to what the law gives you, the 5 million silver medalists and the bronze medalists, 2 million, my office, the Office of the President, will grant additional cash incentives to our athletes in the Tokyo Olympics. So Carlo Paalam, silver medalist for boxing, will receive additional 2 million coming from the Office of the President. Nesty Peticio, silver medalist for boxing, will also receive an additional of 2 million from my office. Yumer Felix Marcial, bronze medalist for boxing, will receive an additional 1 million from the Office of the President. And Iris Magno, Olympic athlete for boxing, will receive 200,000 pesos. our other Filipino Olympians will receive 200,000 from the Office of the President. Lahat. And the medalists will receive the Order of Lapu-Lapu Medal. That is a honor given by the Republic of the Philippines to those who have excelled in something and brought honor to the country. Presidential citation for all Olympians sa lahat.
Sir, salamat. Salamat kasi sa suporta, sir. Nastipita siya po from Davao del Sur po.
Basta nanalo.
Carlo paalam po, sir. Salamat kay sir sa tanan nga suporta sa Pilipino, sir. Salamat, sir.
Okay, give me a snappy salute. All of you.
Finally, in our news, with COVID-19 fears again depressing North American movie-going, new Warner Brothers, the DC superhero film, The Suicide Squad, led the weekend box office but took in only $26.2 million, industry watcher Exhibitor Relations said yesterday. The movie, dubbed a pseudo-sequel to 2016's major hit Suicide Squad, again featured A-listers Margot Robbie and Viola Davis, but two big names from the earlier version, Will Smith and Jared Leto, sat this one out. The film's simultaneous release on HBO Max further hurt its box office totals. Hollywood has been struggling to return to pre-pandemic levels. This is an unforgiving market, David A. Gross, who runs consulting firm Franchise Entertainment Research, told Variety. Last week's box office leader, Disney's family-friendly adventure film Jungle Cruise, slipped to second spot, taking in while trapped on a security feed. In fourth place for the second straight week was Disney's Marvel superhero flick Black Widow, starring Scarlett Johansson, which took in $3.9 million. It now has domestic earnings of $174 million, pushing it past Universal's F9, The Fast Saga, as the top-grossing film in North America so far this year. And in fifth was Matt Damon's film Stillwater from Focus Features at $2.8 million. Damon in the movie plays a burly American oil worker who travels to France to help his estranged daughter, who is played by Abigail Breslin, when she's jailed for a killing she says she did not commit.
You're in Marseille for vacation?
Visiting my daughter.
You're the father of the girl, the American student?
Yes, ma'am. Allison came here for college.
More movies to watch out for.
Especially that Stillwater movie by Matt Damon. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Please join us again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.